welcome you all to UW Claire's Faculty Academic Staff Forum. My name is Erica Benson. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, and I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker. Dr. April Bleske-Rechek is a professor in the psychology department, and we will be getting to hear some of her research today with many of her students in the talk titled, Can We Nurture Civil Dialogue at UWEC? Lessons Learned from Our Students. So I will note that we will have time for questions and discussion after the talk. So encourage you to be thinking about questions that you have, points that you'd like to highlight. And to our viewers on Zoom, we invite you to join the conversation as well by submitting your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Our wonderful graduate assistant will read those out for us, so please don't be shy. So join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Bleske-Rechek.
Well, thank you all for coming. We have a DPC meeting that I'm so sad to miss. But I am missing that, but I'm happy to be here. Okay, so I want to acknowledge, right, especially halfway in, the onslaught of students who have been involved in the research that I'm going to talk about today. So Izzy Sheely has been involved in a variety of ways. Hannah Nelson, Ella Kwam, Brianna Fuss, Emmy Peggy, Emma Smith, Alexander Russell, and Emma Yeager. So I think about this as a joint effort from my students. And I should also acknowledge at the forefront, I'm going to mention a piece or two where the Chancellor Schmidt, was really involved in this research, but it was the foundation who funded the efforts that we've been engaged in here. So I hope that we have some good lessons to bring back our way. Okay, so a place to start. Why do we have this renewed emphasis on civil dialogue at UW-Eau Claire? Of course, there's a nationwide emphasis on civil dialogue, right? But probably the piece that really put things in motion for us here at UW-Eau Claire was when the survey data from students throughout UW system came out. That report was released in February 1st, 2023, so 3 years ago already. But there were some findings in there that were pretty striking. One finding was that many students were not, even by their own self-report, interested in listening to those with whom they disagree. So here's the percentage of students who said they were not at all, on a 5-point scale, not at all likely to consider those with differing viewpoints when they think about issues like transgender issues, racial inequality, abortion. And I'm presuming that the actual rate is quite higher, right? Because this is not something that you would self-report like, no, I don't listen to other views. I do. Two, many students weren't comfortable expressing their views on difficult issues. So here are the students, the percentage of students who were, again, on a 5-point scale, not at all comfortable expressing their view on transgender issues, racial inequality, and abortion. So there were other issues, of course. I just wanted to give you a sampling. Students also did not report feeling comfortable expressing their views in class. So have you ever expressed your views on a controversial topic in class? Yes or no? 45% said yes. Have you ever wanted to express your views on a controversial topic in class, but decided not to? More actually have decided not to. When we ask them why, of course, some people just don't really, they don't want to that much, they don't know that much. But some pretty popular reasons were worrying about other students dismissing their views as offensive, or worrying that other students would disagree with them. I think we have a climate where disagreement is a bad word, probably because the disagreement we observe online might be a bit combative, right? But I'm a fan of telling my students we can disagree respectively and constructively. And so I really wanted to try to figure out how we could do that, right, on our campus. Okay, so the Chancellor brought a team together, right? The system data came out. President Rothman said, Chancellors, you need to do something. Chancellor Schmidt, our chancellor at the time, said, we're a leader already at our university, and I would fully agree with him. But I also didn't want us, there were a lot of ideas in place, and he wanted us to act quickly. And I said, I feel like we need to test some things, right, before we just throw a whole lot of money and effort towards something without having good data. Psychology is full of interventions that are compelling in face valid, but don't necessarily have good data. So one of the things that I've been exposed to is Unify America. Now, Unify America hosts what they call a college bowl. It's now called the Unify Challenge. So I think my wording is probably going to change over the course of this time. But at the time, in 2023, this was called the College Bowl. I had recently been through an effort through Unify America where nationwide you can go online and you can have a virtual one-on-one meeting with somebody else elsewhere in the nation. You have goal statements together. You get some ground rules, and then you have you get a statement, a goal statement about our nation. Each of you gives a rating for it, and then you share your reactions and you kind of trade who goes first for each goal statement, and trading their like what they said and how they got to that place, what experiences they had that are relevant. And so you essentially, the goal, right, is to have this respectful conversation without conflict. And of course, oh, by the way, and they pair you with somebody who is unlikely to share your views politically, right? So that's the one crucial piece of information they collect from you when you sign up, right? They match you with somebody who's different. So it kind of looks like this for college students doing the College Bowl. They see each other, right? They also have the prompts on the right-hand side leading them through. So it's this like virtual platforms, pretty savvy. Notice the ease of exit button here. If you're not having a good time, you can leave. Okay, so that's important to be aware of. And then the rating. So here's one of the questions. In our country, voting in elections should be mandatory for all eligible citizens. Okay, so each of them gives a rating. When they're ready, right, they start discussing it. And they move through about 16 of these in this case. The goal statements aren't all softballs, by the way. So here are a couple of other examples. College campuses should protect the free expression of a wide range of beliefs, even when those beliefs are expressed through offensive language that attacks certain groups or individuals. Extremely contentious issue right now, right? We should allow anyone with an illness that is either terminal or causes suffering that is unbearable and can't be relieved to legally get assistance in ending their own life. Another, right, very contentious issue. Now, Unify America doesn't start with these statements. Students build, right? Students build up to these. It has a variety of pedagogically valuable elements. So Hartman et al. Published a paper a few years back describing interventions that have been useful for decreasing political polarization or affective polarization. And I think that Unify America, I haven't seen them outline this, but my perception of Unify America in the College Bowl is that it has all these elements that allow for positive outcomes. Equal group status, the interaction partners are both students. They're operating under the same ground rules, and they've had to agree to those before clicking to the next screen, right? They take turns reading the guidelines, actually, like one after the other. Common goals, they have the common goal, have a conversation, share our views. There's cooperation, they have to take turns, right? Their expectations that they're both involved. Both of them are supposed to have their video camera on. They have the support of authorities, meaning they've been given guidelines and there's a leave button right there. We know this is difficult, right? So they're supported. There's the potential for finding common ground. They're asked to share their life experiences. They're also given carefully designed questions that help them get there. So I think it's it was an impressive model for me in thinking about how I could design statements for my students to prompt good conversation. And they also get skills training through modeling. Like they're actually set up in a platform where it's like offering guided questions, right? Oh, how did you get there, right? Ask your partner, what did they experience? So they're getting guidance on that. So these are characteristics that we know are linked to reduced outgroup animosity, right? Increased intellectual humility by recognizing other people have views that have something to offer, right? A willingness to share one's own views. So in fall 2023, I did a pilot. So I had a couple colleagues, Sean McAleer is one of them, right? He and I did this as a bonus option in our class. And then Adam Coons, who runs a course on tolerance, his students did it by assignment. They did a Unify America conversation. One thing that's important to recognize is that when I talk about the Unify America College Bowl, students are paired with somebody who differs from them, at least by their self-identified political leaning. The scale runs from libertarian to socialist. And I just had students, I just knew from Unify America how many, and the key point is that most were with somebody who differed by them from 2 or 3 points. So they were with people who were a conversation partner who was different from them. I surveyed them after, like, how was it? They told me that they were the most common or the most felt emotion beforehand was being nervous. Surprise, surprise. I was worried I was going to be paired up with a very belligerent person with some very intense views. That's kind of a template response, to be honest. But they also told me that after they felt pretty optimistic. Notice nervous, bored, no. They are all good ones, invigorated, excited, inspired. That was super positive, right? We both respected each other's viewpoints. It was beautiful. Of course, that was a really select sample, right? These were students who volunteered, and then there were students, half of them were students in a course called tolerance, right? So this is when I was like, okay, Chancellor Jim, can we do something bigger, right? And he and the foundation got behind me and we started I should show you this. Sorry, first. So 100% reported their partner acted respectfully, that they and their partner found quite a bit or a great deal of common ground, even though so many were paired with somebody who was quite different from them politically. Let this be a lesson to us. Just because somebody states a certain political view doesn't mean we don't share things in common with them. You don't have to agree on everything. 77% enjoyed it quite a bit or a great deal. And 67% said they would feel much more comfortable interacting, somewhat or much more comfortable interacting with somebody with an opposite view. Okay, so sorry, I jumped to that, but back to the chancellor and the foundation sponsoring me to do something bigger. Okay, so I started a semester-long randomized controlled trial. I can't believe this was 2 years ago already. We followed students over the semester, okay, using an experimental design. So I wanted to adjust their attitude. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do classroom observations or anything like that, but I thought we could gauge their attitudes. So things like desire to engage. How much do you want to engage in discussions with other students who hold views on controversial issues that differ from your own? If a controversial issue came up during one of your classes, how likely would you be able to share your views? So willingness to share friends' views. The degree to which they feel that they disagree, right? How much do they agree and disagree on? So my thought is that we would get some change in the degree to which they feel they can agree on more and disagree on less. And then their view of different others, essentially animosity, right? Like demonizing the other. I wanted less of that. So more favorable views on perceptions that those who hold different views disagree respectfully, that they have reasons behind their arguments, that they're not mean-spirited. There were actually 12 of these, and I created a composite measure, okay? But we assessed those at baseline, which was week 2. So we invited a whole host of students into the study. In fact, they were 2,200 or almost 2,300 continuing first-year students, okay? We got good response rates. Half of them went into the control, half of them went into the experimental group. So those were baseline attitudes. Weeks 5 through 7, they were invited back for phase 2. By the way, they got a $10 electronic gift card. And then at phase 2, they were invited back. So said, hey, during week 7, we're going to have the phase 2 survey. But before that, we need you to do your online task. And some of them, their online task was watching a video on making butter in Wisconsin. And for half of them, their online task was to sign up and have an online conversation, the College Bowl. Okay. One thing you'll notice right away is that the control group, right, were far more likely to do that. They were far more likely to watch the video than the conversation group was likely to actually sign up and do it. I'll come back to this, okay, because it's important. And then at phase 3, we assess their attitudes again. Over the course of that full study, they earned $50 in electronic gift cards. Okay, again, they were assigned to somebody who was generally politically different from them by 2 points on average. Okay, so we did get them paired up with people, or Unify America did get them paired up with somebody who was different. 98% reported an overall positive experience. My partner and I agreed on several things, and when we didn't, it was a very civil conversation. Delightful. 64% reported a respectful conversation partner. I think I learned that many of us do feel similarly about a variety of topics, that most people try to be respectful, thoughtful what others have to say, and that a lot of us youth can agree that talking about this stuff can be uncomfortable. I love their open-ended responses. They were insightful. And then also personal growth. We weren't looking for this, but we had so many students say, I realized that it's important to have conversations like this. Like I practice having to articulate what I thought about something. And they enjoy having an opportunity to debate. However, right, only 18%, as I mentioned, of those conversation condition participants actually followed through, whereas 50% of the control group came back for phase 2. So at phase 3, I sent a random sample of the non-phase 2 completers, a survey that said, why didn't you come back for phase 2? Why didn't you do your online task? To those who stayed on, why did you do it? Right? Well, I wanted the incentive. Okay. I was curious. I had time in my schedule. Okay. To those who didn't, why didn't you do it? Here are a couple of prominent ones. I didn't want to talk to a stranger online. I wasn't interested in engaging. So there's an element of apathy here, I think, that we have to stand up to. Note, I didn't highlight this one. I didn't have time in my schedule because I think that was frankly bogus. So when you look at the conversation participants who completed the conversation and those who didn't, like you can compare them at baseline, the ones who actually did it had busier schedules in terms of how many hours per week they work than the others, right? So it's whether you're willing to make the time, right? And we all experience this, right? Where do we put our time? And notice I didn't think the financial incentive was worth it. That's not an issue. Anyway, so I think this also was illuminating, right? It helps us understand what we're up against. Okay, so just thinking about that attrition, I want to show you the systematic results for just the students who went through all 3 phases of the experiment, okay? Okay, so this was a positive. Okay, we had 5, I don't know if you remember from a few slides back, there were 5 key outcome variables, okay? Agreement and disagreement are 2. How much do you disagree on? Nothing? Everything, essentially, okay? And then how much do you agree, right? What do you agree on? Nothing, everything, okay? The control group from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, we're seeing no change. What do you agree on? No statistically significant change. Okay, so I'm hoping you're seeing that through the error bars. For the conversation condition, those who went through the Unify America conversation right before phase 2, we see a decrease, a statistically significant decrease in the extent to which they feel they disagree with those who have different views, and an increase in how much they feel they agree on. That was not maintained through the follow-up, okay? But it was a nice change, like right there. And actually, I was just reading another paper this morning. So many of the interventions that are out there are short-term. They don't have lasting power. And that's another signal of what we're up against, right? Like, yes, we need repeated practice, repeated reminders. I mean, it's like anything we learn. At least, okay, for me, I shouldn't project. This is my issue. I need repeated exposure, repeated practice, right? And I think this is a muscle, right? Engaging in tough dialogue, it's a muscle. Okay, there were 3 other dependent variables. We had asked them, right, how much they wanted to engage with students who they know have differing views from their own. I included this here not to highlight that we didn't get any effect, which is sad, but also look at the levels. This is the full scale, negative to positive. They're nearly at floor, right? People generally don't want to do this, okay? Willingness to share. We didn't get a statistically significant effect of going through the Unified America conversation. We did have increased favorability toward others who perceive things differently from them. And that was maintained to time 3. Or to phase 3. I don't know if it's maintained to right now though, right? 2 years later or even a week after that, I don't know. I also don't know whether it came through in their behaviors, right? So I don't know if they were more likely to engage with others, who they thought they might disagree with, right? But at least they felt less negatively about those who are likely to feel differently from them. At least in the short term. Okay, so that was super exciting, right? Like we felt really good about that. I think a lot of people were excited, or at least people who were involved. Chancellor Schmidt, I crafted an email for him and he sent it to all students at UW-Eau Claire and UW-Eau Claire Barron County, inviting them to the next semester participate in the College Bowl. The foundation funded, like they said, yep, we'll put up enough. However many students do it, $25 credit at the bookstore. And I had thought like not money. I had thought at the bookstore, you can buy apparel, like we can boost commitment, like a feeling of belonging at the university. I was kind of banking on that. Probably not it. Either way, the point is only 109 did it.
Wow.
Yep. It was so sad. I was so sad. But the typical student who did it was paired with somebody who was a couple points different from them politically. The mean rating was 9.1 and fully 59% gave it a 10 of a 10. So this is Unify America on their back end. As soon as students wrap up, they say, rate your conversation. How was it? How'd you feel? And they also ask people if they want to make a video to make a video. And a whole bunch of students do actually. I don't have any, but I've seen some. They're pretty fun. So super favorable response. But that too is a lesson, right? Okay. So we've got some tentative conclusions, okay? For students who do engage, positive experiences are extremely common. Short-term change in some attitudes is possible, okay? But most students don't voluntarily do this, even with incentives, even with the chancellor encouraging them. So my students and I started in 2 directions. We wanted to know what are the specific fears that are preventing students from engaging? And what might they hope for? Like what hopes could draw them in? And then second, if you assign them to do this, do they experience those outcomes? What happens? If people are only doing it voluntarily, right? Is that different from being assigned? Okay, so hopes and fears. I'm keeping my eye on the clock. Okay, we went around campus and asked people to tell us. Imagine you're in this situation, you're going to be paired up with a classmate to talk face to face about issues that you know you're not going to agree on, right? What fears or insecurities would you have going into this? What would you be worried about? And then if you feel excited or hopeful, right? Like what goals would you have? What would you be hopeful for? Okay, top fears from most to least common. Being disrespected. Conflict. It'll be heated. It'll get hot, right? My partner won't listen to my opinion, not being heard, feeling stupid. That was a common one, actually. So common that my student researchers, every time they got that on an ACT nomination form, said, stupid, because they just kind of made a joke about it because it kept coming up, right? People are worried about feeling dumb. I'll feel uncomfortable. I'll be judged negatively. Okay, you get the idea. I like this. My partner will say something that upsets me. I'll say something that upsets my partner, right? They're worried about both. What students hope for? There were fewer of them, but there still were plenty. I'll learn why people believe what they believe. That was the most common. My partner and I will have a civil conversation. I'll change their mind. I'll share my views. I'll teach them new information. We saw this quite a few times. I'll teach them how it should be. Yeah, I know. So it's another thing we're up against. We'll find common ground. I'll make a new friend. Okay.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
So were those closed-ended responses that they checked, or did they write?
These were open-ended.
Okay.
Yep. These were open-ended, just listing things down. Yeah. One of the most enjoyable open-ended tasks I've had participants do.
Right.
Because they really said a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep, that's a great question, thank you. What happens when students are assigned to engage? Okay, so part 2. Okay. Last spring, a year ago already. 339 students from 6 professors' courses were assigned to engage in a Unify America challenge. I can tell you firsthand, right? I had 100 and 120 students assigned to do this in my classes. And I didn't have 120, 80. I had a few who were not happy. And I had a couple who didn't do it. They were like, nope, I'll take the 10-point deduction. I'm not doing it. I get too anxious, right? So I had a couple who just didn't do it. So they're not here. That's important, right? I'm guessing there may have been a couple in other classes as well. Afterward, I sent a survey, right? To students who had done it, okay? Students in all the classes, okay? 24% responded. That's pretty good. Like, there's no incentive. It's a reasonable response rate. This is just a synopsis, but here's the degree to which they reported experiencing all those fears. And by the way, there were like 60 fears altogether and 45 hopes altogether. So there was a laundry list of items, but they're in some categories. I'm not showing all the categories, but this is the most experienced fear group, feeling anxious. And even that barely gets, it's not much. Look at that. The most common fear, being disrespected, is at that floor. Okay, this is really reassuring. Experienced hopes, sharing opinions, listening, feeling heard, and the lowest, changing partner views. I like to think that's a good thing. Their experiences did not differ by gender. Men and women, fears are low. Experienced hopes are moderate to high. They did not differ as a function of whether they identified as a member of a marginalized group or not. I think that's probably a #1 concern for people and a really positive and important result. I think it reinforces the idea that we need to learn to engage with people on an individual basis to see what they bring to the table, right? And that's how we can probably reduce hatred and animosity. And then finally, their experiences did not vary with their political leaning. So here are the experienced fears: extremely liberal students, extremely conservative students. And here is the degree to which they experienced the hopeful outcomes: extremely liberal, extremely conservative. There is no statistically significant association between their political leaning and the degree to which they experience those hopes and fears. Unify America, like I mentioned, collects data on the back end. They know the political separation of the 2 conversation partners. When they provide those data, you never know who, like if I've had it coming out of UW-Eau Claire, I don't know which one is the UW-Eau Claire student. All I know is the pairing. So I've contacted them, asking them to do research on this very issue and publish it. But the idea is that it doesn't matter if they're the same political identification on that 7-point scale or 4 or more points different, they're having a positive experience. Okay, so I'm guessing that you have some tentative conclusions yourself. I'm going to give you mine and then ask for your thoughts. I think that we need to address students' potential disinterest and their fears. Expectation is that different means you're the opposite, right? You're either a Trumper or the other way, right? Disagreement, that's it just seems like it's a bad word, right? That it's automatically assumed to be bad. Interacting is uncertain and it feels risky, right? My students who didn't want to do it, I could say, it's really likely that you're going to have a really nice conversation, but I couldn't guarantee it. And that uncertainty, I think, really rubs people the wrong way. I think we could do more to develop students' knowledge of behaviors and tactics that enable constructive conversation. I've read some great books, one by Duhigg, Super Communicators, which is just a beautiful, just like essay essentially on like how to get to know people. Provide frequent scaffolded opportunities to practice doing this. Help them see that they can be different and similar in so many different ways. hitting the whole person, and then giving students time to reflect on the benefits of doing it. One of the enjoyable things in my class is to engage students in this type of exercise and then talk about it, like, why was that useful? Okay, so I think that's where I'm at. Maybe some ideas for things we can do to make this happen on our campus more. Okay, thanks. Sorry, as couple over. Questions? Yeah, Sean?
Yeah, thanks so much for your work in the same. I'm curious about, do you have any sense of how this, is this like in some of the disinclination to engage in disagreement? Is, to what extent is that like this upper Midwestern ethos? Is this, do you have any sense nationally? How do these numbers?
Okay,
track?
so the disinclination to engage, how does it track versus like the Midwestern niceness versus everywhere else? I'm guessing from the national data on censoriousness, concern about like animosity toward the other. Those data from national data are everywhere.
Not nihilism, too, right?
Yes,
Eating
nihilism,
it,
like, yeah. So my impression is that it's everywhere. What have you seen that makes, like, have you seen data that you think speaks to
No, I
that?
was just, I have this tendency of talking to people about this, and go, oh, but you know what our students are like. Is that, I don't,
Yeah,
is that like a too easy
yeah.
explanation? It sounds
Yeah.
like maybe that's not. But
Yeah, I think the data on like students interested in engaging with diverse viewpoints, that's nationwide, right? That's a concern everywhere. I should emphasize, by the way, that students who've gone through this, they were the ones who said, you should force people to do this. I didn't want to do it, but it was really good. And that's when I had a conversation with students of like, what's going to happen if I assign it, if I force it? Because some people were like, no, I don't know. I don't need to do the work dealing with people who are hateful toward people like me. And then I was like, right, like that's an important point. But I also have data now that suggests that people who identify as a member of a marginalized group have just as positive experience. We have to have the interactions, right? If we're not going to have them today, we got to have them with somebody tomorrow if we want to make positive change. You know, I had a colleague just the other day remind me of Daryl Davis, who brought around pro-Nazis, right? Yeah.
I mean, I wonder for I mean, it's very surprising, right? 9,000 invitations and 100. And I wonder if it speaks, I'm just wondering if your sense is if it speaks to students' unwillingness to have these kinds of discussions versus an apathy of doing anything.
Yeah.
Right, like I don't see them going to college campus sporting events. I don't see them coming to speaker series, right?
Okay, point, I agree with you. Okay, so great point. Like how much of the non-participation is student apathy toward this versus student, well, apathy or just not coming to anything?
Yeah,
I agree. At the same time, two things. One, it's virtual and they do things virtually more than they'll do a lot of things. And two, if it was an invitation to hop online to watch, you know, the Super Bowl show, whatever that person's name is, versus that, you know, I think more people would have done that, you know, I don't know. But I agree with you. I think there is something to that. It is harder and harder to get students to do things in person or virtually that are outside what they're required to do.
and I've talked to my students about this and they've said to me, if it's optional, they're not doing it.
Yeah.
No matter what. And I've even asked like, what if your letters of recommendation were at rest? I'm like, that's fine, I'll find someone else to write me a letter of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
there just seems to be this level that is
Yeah.
just like, whatever.
Yeah, and there were student comments in there who said, I know that the student I was interacting with had to do this as an assignment. They weren't interactive. So you do get those, and those students are disappointed because they went in willing to give it a go. And then they're with somebody who has to do it and isn't wanting to get anything out of it.
But what
So-
I'm hearing is we should get Bad Bunny to sponsor.
Thank you.
this.
That was the name I was like, Bunny. Crystal?
Do you think there's a difference in like cooperation or compliance if it's coming from? Is it coming from a professor versus coming from another student?
Yeah,
Or-
yeah, compliance. So versus as a function of who it's coming from. Yeah, I think you're onto something, right? Like if we had fellow students saying, hey, you should do this,
Right.
would we get more buy-in? If we could get some bottom-up movement.
Yeah.
We need administrative support. Like none of this would happen if the chancellor hadn't been like, yes. And the foundation hadn't said, yes, we'll fund it. But we need ground roots buy-in. Jeff?
I think that the structure behind the Unified America is so important because it does track Hartman, which tracks decades worth of intergroup
Yeah.
contact
Yeah.
theory, right? And optimal engagement and conditions. And so
Yep.
we can't just throw people into a situation and say, discuss. It has to, there are these parameters that have to follow. So then whose responsibility is that? Because like for what, like 2 decades now, I think I've been structuring my classes in a way that is informed by these practices and then engaging students under these guidelines to ensure that like any view is valid, but you must support your view,
Yeah.
not just with opinion, but with, right? It's appropriate in our discipline, and yet still I'll have one student a semester. It's like, I wasn't able to express my views. I'm like, oh my goodness, yes, you did. I know who you are. Your views. I'm sorry you weren't comfortable because it seemed like it was, and it seemed like everyone acted like it, right? So there is some, I don't know what I'm trying to say about this, other than like it's not just an in-class thing. If it is, then we need guidelines. It's not just a come if you want to this activity being hosted by this group. We need a unified dimension.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think what you're saying is that it doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
It's not just gonna, it's not gonna.
Well, it's like, you couldn't support, like, I didn't feel, I sometimes think we conflate, like, I wasn't able to express my opinions versus you didn't agree with my opinion. You didn't buy, like, I expressed myself and I didn't get a rousing round of applause for that. So therefore I didn't feel comfortable expressing my view.
Right, or maybe they didn't express again because they didn't get the agreement they wanted. Yeah. And that is, I mean, that's that discussion of what it means to actually express and respect intellectual humility, especially in others, is like, that's important. But I don't think that's easy. Especially thinking about, Crystal, your comment from before, coming from faculty, we are not models of intellectual humility. And again, maybe I'm most worried about myself, but we need to be better models.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm not at all familiar with this, but those that found it positive while they were, and they completed the entire thing, are they given an opportunity, or is there potential that they could repeat if they felt a positive? Can they do this again?
Yes.
Continue it, or can they? I'm just saying, like, you want to get peer-to-peer invitation. That's probably the most compelling way is, I've done this, I felt so motivated, I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
And
that
would speak highly on.
I love that. And it was actually that having that was really useful. So peer-to-peer supporting one another and also repeating. In my classroom, right, students who had engaged in it the year before said, oh yeah, you guys totally want to do this. Like, so they were supportive. And I think that the word of mouth, in fact, I came into my lab meeting one day and one of my students was like, I have a student in my class who did the Unify America Challenge and they talked about it to the whole class. So they were like super excited to their class about it, which was awesome, right? This is a first year student who was like in some intro public health class, like just all about it. So that type of stuff is super exciting. And we know that students who go, well, so Unified Challenge, if you do one, they're like, do you want to do another? Do you want to do the deep dive? You know, Bridge USA students in our Bridge USA UW Eau Claire here, they come back and they bring new people with them, right? So they're constantly have this like core group, but a changing, right? New people group. So that's positive. Braver Angels, this is my son actually works for this nonpartisan organization that hosts national virtual debates. And they have core members, but they also have hundreds. They just had a debate the other day on a resolution about ICE. And it was attended by over 600 nationwide. So I think people that is room for word of mouth to spread, you know, or to make it happen. But yeah, I think we have to, and I know Dean Alex is already all about this. We need a concerted effort. I'm tired, which he also knows, but I want to keep going, but I'm like, yeah, we need concerted effort.
The data is from such a long, like, and so consistent. do they see changes in the data given the political climate we have now versus years prior?
In terms of like part of like affected polarization nationwide, the polarization is worse today than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. Like
Do they
it's gotten
see
increasingly worse.
changes cooperation, and are people willing to now that the dynamic is so?
Stay like willing to do something like this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I would have to ask Unify America. I'm guessing that there's concern, but hopefully the people who are up for the challenge are still up for the challenge. Thoughts, Jeff?
No, I agree with you. I don't think that there's data that I'm aware of. that
Yeah,
have
I don't
that
know of
track.
any.
Well, no,
That's a great question.
The opt-out rates.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's thank Dr. Bleske-Rechek.
Okay, thank you.